Physics, rules, what is it? Welcome to the superpilotish channel. My name's Graham Wilson. Today I'm going to be talking about flight training. Is it physics or rules? In my basement. So the other day, just at the other end of, at the last little bit of my show that I did on Friday, one of the viewers, Wrench, was asking, and I didn't get to the question, flight training, is it physics or rules mostly? So I thought, well, I didn't get to it. I was just closing it out, and it's like, oh, I wanted to answer the question. So here's the answer to the question. And then I was also thinking, this is a fantastic topic for a show. So, you know, what is the real emphasis in flight training? Is it physics, how the plane actually flies? Is it, don't break those air rules or the air laws? What is it? So I started fishing around on the internet to see. Probably most of the viewers here are American, I think. But, I think maybe it could be about 50-50 Canadian and American. I'm not too sure. But I know in Canada here, where I am, Windsor, Ontario, if we're going to be doing any type of flight testing, or we'll say like for the private pilot license, that you're getting tested at the written exam level on 4 general things. So that'll be meteorology, general knowledge, air law, and navigation. So that's easy to remember. Hey, Shecky. And but then I was like, oh, they must have pretty much the same thing in the States. Hey, Wrench, this is your topic. So so it's like I started looking around. So I found Googling it up. Okay, what's on the exams and stuff. I found an exam blueprint for the FAA PAR exam, which stands for Private Pilot Airplane. But that's another thing I found too, is that in the United States, they call them airplanes and all the FAA all the technical papers and everything, ADH Pilot 1. And so over in the States, they call them airplanes. Here in Canada, we call them aeroplanes. Ooh, kind of British. So anyways, it was like, oh, so airplanes. And there was like 12 categories of things that you would learn to pass your written exam over in the US with the FAA exam. So 12 things, and I was looking through all 12 of them, and it's kind of like when I was looking into ATPL or ATP exams for airline pilots. There's different ones, like say in the United States or Canada or even in Europe, the different exams. And over in England, they write a whole bunch of different exams. Here we do too. But generally, if you're looking at all the things internationally from one country to the next, it's all a combination of physics and rules and a few other things in there, navigation, so you know where you're going. And what's that weather going to be like too? That could get into physics a little bit too. So it was like, that's an interesting topic. So and then that kind of begs the question, is like, what's more important? And it's kind of like they're all equally important. So if you and I wrote down on a little piece of paper here all the different things, the 12 different categories that the Americans test on. Yeah, like I said, we test the same things. We kind of lump them together differently in Canada. And so is it physics or rules? A little bit of both and more. So, and hey, Jim, I see you popped in here. So, that's the short answer. Bye. No. Well, I'll just kind of expand on that, I guess, a little bit. Well, just from my experience here in as a flight instructor in Canada, when it comes to written exams, there's in our 4 little chunks, there's certain categories that people don't do as great in other categories at. So like general knowledge is a big one that gets that people don't do so awesome on written tests. Sometimes it covers a lot of different stuff, and you'll also find that people for written exams, is that they'll do the best at what they're interested in. So I know that generally for people, most guys, they're flying around doing their thing, and they like maps and planning and all this other stuff. Where so navigate any type of navigation stuff, usually guys do pretty well at that, and I find that there's a weird correlation statistically that girls just they don't really do as well that I've seen in navigation. Doesn't mean that they can't. I don't think it's because they can't do it, because we got lots of women flying around and they don't get lost. But it's what it is. I think it's just like kind of the way you've grown up, or the way that whatever you're interested in. So when you guys are talking about, hey man, let's do a road trip up to Algonquin Park and go camping, and you whip out a map or you check out the GPS on your phone. Oh, that's another thing about navigation that's changing too, is that more guys are getting worse at navigation. That's what I should point out there too, because everybody relies on their GPS on their phone, in their car. And I was just telling a story the other day to my brother about how unfortunately I had to, when I was a pilot examiner, unfortunately I had to fail somebody because they couldn't read the map and they didn't know scale, uh, stuff like that. Okay, 1 mile equals 1 inch on the map, or something like that. Or I don't know if they're like skimping that in high school or something, or no one cares, and so I don't care. I got my GPS. You see that guys like delivering pizza, like they don't look at a map. They hop in the car. All right, I'm ready to go get my next pizza. They whip out their phone. Maybe they're checking, and I'm like, geez, when I was a delivery guy, it's like by the time you get into the car, you already know where you're going to be going because you looked at a map last week. So you're like, oh, that street, that block. Okay, I get there like this. And then along the way, you kind of plan along the way. You go the general direction of where you're going. Yeah, so that is something in the younger generation that is navigation is, yeah, it's kind of going down the toilet a little bit. So if you are an instructor, make sure they know the maps, because kids these days, you can tell I'm old, they don't grow up with maps too much, or even eventually. I think I mentioned this once before on my show, that it was like eventually the younger generation, they're going to have a time when the air traffic controllers say, okay, yeah, he's at approximately your 2 o'clock 1,000 feet above you, and they'll be like, 2 o'clock, what? They got their phone, huh? What? No, like one of those things. That's right, I did a show on how to draw a clock, and which apparently, what was it, 25% of people can't draw a clock. I forget what it was, but so yeah, here we go. Oh, you know what? And because I'm going to keep this kind of free form here. And as I see the questions, I'll just kind of get to them here. So we got an interesting thing here from DH Pilot 1. And he was saying the DH Pilot 1, if you didn't know, he is an instructor. And so he said, I flew the other day with a 13-year-old and I asked him which way was west, and he pointed to the right direction and said it was the sun was there. Okay. Yeah, wherever the sun is, it's west, right? Very good. Wrong. Well, luckily the kid's 13, and and the thing is, yeah, they got a little bit more time to learn after 13. So, and oh, that's another thing too. Yeah, well, let's just talk with Wrench here. Thank you, Wrench, for the topic today. And so he drives with the GPS often too. So he says, I don't keep updated maps in the car. Yeah, and that's one of the things. Okay, here we go. Here's a flying tip. I think we talked about this before, Wrench, that the if you are doing a flight test, you must have up-to-date maps. In Canada, the question will be asked, how do you know that your map is up to date? And the correct answer to that is, it's on the Nav Canada website. There you go. And so, yeah, up-to-date maps are good. I flew once with what we have here is I got it over on my chair over there. Canada Flight Supplement, big thick book. It has all the airports in Canada, and I had one that was ancient, and I was flying. I was doing my instructor rating, and the instructor that was teaching me to be an instructor, he said, "Oh, do you got a CFS?" That's the thick book. It's like, "Yeah, I got an older one." He's like, "Yeah, that should do." So as it turned out, it's like I looked at it was like really ancient. He looked at it. What year is this from? It was like, I don't know, it's like 12, 15 years old or some dumb thing. He's like, "Oh, this is useless." And threw it in the back of the plane, and we just went flying anyways. But yeah, and it turns out I looked in that old the book, and it was a great example of the in between the time of that publishing and when I was doing the flight, one of the airports we were going to had actually changed its identifier here in Chatham. It was Chatham is CK, no, CYCK now. Before it used to be CNZ3. Yeah, so it's kind of like they changed the name of it. There was other air what was it? Some runways were closed. Some airports weren't there anymore. I'm looking through this whole thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, it is probably pretty good to have an up to date map. If you're actually going there, like for study purposes or something, it's not too bad. If it's not, you get an old map, you mark it all up, and it gets all covered in pencil and everything like that. Big deal. Just make sure you got a nice new one for the for your exam. Oh, good point here too. And I also noticed that in the book too, is that runway numbers will change slightly as well, because as the good point there, DH DH Pilot One, yeah, runway numbers can change too. That's where because the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole always switches around, and then all your runway numbers are based on the magnetic heading of the airplane. And then so if it switches at, it's about a, plus or minus 5 degrees there, and then once it goes past that +5 or -5, then you change the numbers on the runway. So yeah, that's true. And I mean, hopefully it's still runway, hopefully there's still some cement there or asphalt, but yeah, so there's that. What else could I tell you about here? That actually got me thinking too about the FAA. It's my little cue cards that I have, the exam, and I was thinking, what would it take for me to get like an American license too? It's like, because it's just Detroit's just right across the border. What if somebody wants to, I don't know, wants me to fly their plane or something? I don't know. So yeah, there's different ways to change your license, and like if you are writing an exam where you will have to know your physics and your rules or laws. If you are going to a new country, you'll have to, and you want to convert your license over. Okay, here for an example is I can fly a Canadian registered airplane over in the United States, no problem. All the licenses, all that stuff, you're all cool. Just like an American can fly over to Canada with their airplane and their American license, it's all good there. The problem comes is when you want to fly, if I, with a Canadian license, want to fly an American registered airplane, or I could go over to the United States and rent a car, no sweat. And they take my Canadian driver's license, my Ontario driver's license, but you can't do that with airplanes. So if you are going to go on vacation somewhere, I'm in Canada. It's like, oh, I'll just go down to Arizona in the wintertime and rent a plane and fly around there. You won't be able to do that with your Canadian license because it's an American registered plane. Then that's when you got to go do another written test, and it's a conversion. You got to get do so. There's a whole bunch of rigmarole you got to do there. Pay some fees, of course, for the government. I think you have to get a medical. That's a whole other thing. But I've known people that have done that, and it's pretty common around here in Windsor for people to have an American addition onto their Canadian license, kind of thing. So a lot of and I know for corporate guys that are flying business jets that are based out of here in Windsor, some of those guys, it's actually an American registered jet, and it was cheaper for the owner of the jet to get these guys their American licenses to fly the jet than it was to transfer over the registration from United States to Canada. It's like, well, these guys, that's how you can afford a jet, right? You save your money and do the math and check it all out. So, okay, what else we got? Yeah, Shecky, here we go. Shecky wants me to pick him up in Detroit Rock City. Well, let me know when you're in town. So, and yeah, so I didn't really have a whole lot to talk about here. Whether physics is, well, getting back to the physics of rules, that's another thing that I was thinking about was that some people, depending on how you're, when it comes to flight training, depending on how people think or what their background is, I've kind of mentioned that before, that some people will really get into the physics of it. And actually, I knew one guy too. He was I only flew with him once, and he was this like obsessive compulsive disorder kind of master's engineering student. And he was like so precise about everything. It was pretty wild. And then so he knew all the physics about the airplane and everything, and all the rules too. But yeah, actually, that just okay. He was a real physics guy, but come to think of it, that's not a good example because he was just like perfect at everything. That was a funny guy, the guy too. He hadn't flown in about 3 years, I think, so I had to go check him out on an airplane. And we went up, and the guy flew like a flawless flight, absolutely perfect. And it was just like flight test standards, everything. The guy's great. And so I was like, well, from what I've seen, this guy's an absolutely perfect pilot. And then because his obsessive compulsive disorder kind of kicked in, I said, yep, you're good to go. Rent the plane anytime you want. Signed him off in his logbook. And he's like, what? You only flew with me for half an hour. How can you tell how I fly? He was freaking out that I didn't test him enough. And it was like, well, if you're perfect, you really got to test him that much. So like, go for it, buddy. And then he only ever did one flight after that too, where he came back, and the girl that was working on the desk, she said, who was that guy that went flying today? I'm like, what, was there a problem? Or, because I was the boss, something wrong? She's like, no, when he was doing his walk around or his pre-flight inspection, he took a half hour to do that. And then he did a 15-minute flight. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like that guy. And then he just disappeared. I think he got a job making lots of money somewhere, but really just a super brainy guy. That was funny. I don't know, just telling a story here. And here we go. Here's a good example. Some instructors want you to open the manual and know all of the rules. Yeah. Instructors aren't all they're not all the same. It's just like all pilots are not all the same, and all people aren't all the same. So yeah, some instructors will be pickier about some things than others. I have certain little things that I'm just like, I don't know, it's weird. It just kind of bugs me, and it's like, I have a reason why it bugs me, but because I've heard of a horror story because of like, okay, I remember that. That's why it bugs me. But as far as open the manual and knowing all the rules, I think for me, I would like anyone flying to know where is the manual, because technically you're supposed to have all your documentation, which includes the operator's handbook on board the plane. Some people don't even know where it is. So it's like, where is it? Well, it's theirs for your reference when if you're in a say something's going wonky on your plane, and like, oh, this is weird. And then, oh, you could always whip out the manual and say, what's the emergency procedures, or something. You're at another airport, and you're picking somebody up, and they decided they were gonna show up with their bowling ball collection to bring it to your house, or something like that. So yeah, how would you adjust? What's the maximum weight you can take, and all that stuff's in that like the manual for the airplane, and or even for other stuff. It's like ideally you should be able to find the information. You don't have to know everything as a pilot. No one can. Uh, some guys think they do, but it's like any pilot that says that they're like perfect and they know everything. Uh, I don't even know if I want to go flying with those guys because they're a little weird. So, okay, what else can we talk here? I don't know. I went off on a tangent. Who cares? It's my show. I can do whatever I want. So physics or rules, a little bit of both, a little bit of extra, and that's my official answer. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. So here we go. Now this is Wrench is asking: is it legal to take off overweight? You know the answer to this one. No, and that weight is determined by the engineers that built the plane and experimented on it, and they found out that this maximum weight shifted. Actually, I'll describe this with my KD12X. All right, there we go. We got the old KD12X with the 40 flap extension on it now after last show. So if you didn't know, maximum weight your airplane can be is it's determined by the manufacturer basically, but you also have to be careful that the center of gravity is not too far forward or too far back, because it's not designed to do that. So generally, for your average little plane like the KD12X here, usually the center of gravity is like somewhere around this part of the wing, about there. And it can kind of be anywhere, center of gravity here. And then, yeah. And so I've always explained that to students that when they're like, well, if they're brand new and they don't know too much. Now, this is getting into physics. You could talk about moment arms and all that other free body diagram stuff that mechanical engineers like. But yeah, so it's like, okay, if they kind of don't get it, I like to like exaggerate. So I say, okay, let's just say I want to bring a grand piano. We're going to go take this grand piano and we're going to stick it on the front of my airplane on my Cessna 172. So it's really heavy, right? And I'll just bungee that grand piano on there. We'll get the piano movers to drop it off on the nose. Then we'll go take off and fly around. Do you think we could do that? And they'd be like, no, you can't fly the piano on your nose. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll put the piano on the tail. We'll just we'll ratchet strap that puppy on the back. We'll just go take off. Like, no, you can't do that. So there must be some point that makes the plane not go too far like that and not too far like that. And so we can fly, right? And they go, oh, yeah. And then, okay, then let's figure out how to calculate that. So, yeah, there we go. And then, oh, here we go, the keg. Where is this? I saw something about a keg in here. It caught my eye. Okay, so DH Pilot 1 is talking about the keg. Okay, now this was a neat one. Wrench might be interested in this. There was one pilot examiner, pretty good. I would say he's like a friend of mine, but a good coworker. He worked at the other. We got along great, and he worked at the other flight school at the airport, and so he was also an examiner. I would test his guys, and he would test my guys sometimes. And he asked one time that, okay, we're going to go here to this airport and pick up a keg of beer. Can you put it in the back of a Cessna 172? So it was like that made the student or the candidate for the flight test figure out the dimensions of the cargo door to see if you can get a keg of beer in there. As it turned, and then he had to find out like the standard size of a keg or something like that from the beer store. And anyways, that was pretty good. And yeah, he always did like to ask those little funny things, but that could be something that happens. So where are we here? So here we go. Oh, here we go. Sounds like Wrench learned the hard way here. Okay, he built and flew many RC planes before he learned the full scale, which means regular airplanes. And so that stuff was learned through crashes. Yes. If you're going to learn through crashes, it's better with an RC plane. That's another thing too. If you're watching the show or something and you are into the radio controlled airplanes or drones or anything like that, there's a lot of pilots out there, a lot that start with radio controlled planes, and they're like, all right, I'm going for the real deal now. So there's the transition from radio controlled RC planes to becoming a private pilot. That happens a lot. So if you are an RC pilot and you've built a few planes, that will definitely help you out for knowing how airplanes fly. And I've seen, generally, I think I've seen anyone that did make that transition from RC planes to getting their private license. They were generally all quite good. So I can't think of any that were bad. So there you go. You do well at what you're interested in. Just like if you're interested in physics, you're gonna do great on the theoretical aerodynamics and weight and balance and stuff like that of an airplane. If you're a lawyer, you're going to be right on top of the air law. Actually, I did a flight. Actually, you know what? That reminds me. Okay, one last story before you shut her down about the law, air law. This was a law student, and he was just about to graduate, and I did a flight test on him, and so generally when we debrief a flight test as an examiner, and before you give someone their license, you just you don't really you just say, yeah, you passed, and here's a few things that could use a little bit of work. They weren't dangerous, you didn't fail that item or anything, but it's just like, yeah, that could use a little work, so we'll kind of debrief that, and I'll give you a few tips to help you out in the future. But you passed, you're good. So this lawyer guy, you could tell he's been like through 3 years of law school. Generally, you don't see a whole lot of lawyers becoming pilots, but they're out there. And he said, well, and then there's like a 4, what do we got there? 4-point marking scale for here in Canada. Used to be 5, now it's 4. And so, anyways, he's like, why was this exercise not done perfectly? Why was this one? And for some, usually I don't care if, like, say somebody's altitude is off a little bit. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's passed. But something just kind of triggered my head that, like, this guy's going to be picky about stuff, I think. So every little thing that he did, I made a note. Okay, this is why this wasn't a perfect 4. This was a 3. His altitude was a little bit shaky at the end of this. And so I went through and I debriefed him on, and he was like, well, why wasn't that perfect? Why wasn't that perfect? What do you mean it wasn't perfect? Prove to me that it wasn't perfect, like a lawyer, I'm getting cross-examined over here. And I'm like, well, my documentation says I submit this to the court that you screwed up here. And so I don't know, he kind of asked for it, and I generally don't. And this is a good example too, why you don't debrief every little item to perfection. Because by the time he was done, he felt like he was a terrible pilot because I told him everything that he did wrong. He was asking for it, but well, there you go. And it wasn't even wrong, but he beat himself up as the perfect lawyer that he was. And so he didn't feel that great about himself after leaving. So I put a really hard, strict rule on that. No, I just don't do that. And other people after that lawyer, they wanted to know every little thing. Perfectionist pilots. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it's not necessary, and it can be a real blow to your ego if everything gets all picked apart. So, anyways, that's my lawyer story. and as it turned out, he went on to he got hired at a law firm, and the last I heard, his instructor, I don't know, as of a couple of years ago, the guy was still flying. So good for him. And what else we got here? Okay, well, we'll see what else is going on here. Yeah, we got a few other little things. I don't know if I gotta check for questions right now, but if I don't check for questions and I miss one, I might have a good topic for next show, just like this one was. Okay, what else we got? All right, well. Ooh, here we go. What's this? And Gray OG snuck in at the very end here. And okay, so Wrench had a friend instructor at Bendix King that got to teach the new president of the company, a young guy with no real interest in planes. Said he took over the plane and flew too low. Okay, we don't like. I forget what's the saying on that. There's like in a low flying contest, there's no winners or something like that. But anyways, Gray OG, thanks for. I'm glad you snuck in late here, and thank you, Dan, for showing up too. So yeah, we're just gonna kind of shut her down here, and all right. So today is Monday. It's actually in Canada. It's a civic holiday here, is what they call it, and oh, here we go. We got another one. Well, okay, I'm gonna get Wrenches. He snuck this in here. Do I teach with the syllabus certain topics for certain lessons? Generally, you'll find that, yeah, Jim. There's a big lag here between the comments and what shows up here. But yeah, do I teach with the syllabus? Yeah, you have to kind of teach with the syllabus just to keep on track so that things are taught in the proper order. There has to be a little method to your madness of teaching. You can't just kind of go in and fly all around. In the old days, I know that they used to be pretty loosey-goosey about teaching, and it would take people a long time to get their licenses because they just go out, boot around, fly around with there wasn't anything to keep them on track. And then, well, that's like where I used to work. And then a new chief flight instructor came in and said, okay, you guys are all flying according to these lesson plans here in the syllabus. And that old stuff's done. And then everybody went out and they got their licenses really quick. So, yeah, certain topics for certain lessons. Yeah, well, generally, Wrench, yeah, everything just kind of is in order in the way that it should be. So that would be, so I mean, you're not going to go out. How would I put that? You're not going to teach someone how to land the plane first before teaching them how to use the trim wheel and how to climb and descend. You know, something like that. So that has to be done in the right order. And okay, that's it. Happy civic holiday to you Canadians. And then, yeah, Monday. So I'll be back on Wednesday because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern. And now I'll shut her down. No more questions. And if there is, I'll probably catch it on the next show on Wednesday. Thank you for watching. Bye.